In this video, I'm going over some of the simplest, most effective things you can do to improve your gameplay and mechanical skill as a survivor. Regardless of how many hours you have, I guarantee you'll learn something beneficial in this video, so make sure to stick around till the end. To start simple, we'll talk about pathing. Pathing is one of the most important things to keep in mind when looping a killer, since it determines the amount of distance between you and the killer in most cases. The easiest tip for pathing that surprisingly not a lot of people know is that when you stutter step to the left and right, you actually lose distance while being chased. It can feel fun to add a little bit of movement side to side while you loop, but ultimately it just helps the killer catch up faster. The best way to keep distance on the killer is running in a straight line, or whatever the equivalent to that is at whatever you're looping. Summed up, don't unnecessarily move for style points, as it may result in an early hit. The next important thing to keep in mind while pathing is being able to hug an object tightly. I'm sure you've heard that a million times, but it's true. If you hug an object while looping tighter than the killer does, it'll take a lot longer for the killer to catch up, which will result in more time wasted for the killer. I'll go more into how important that is later in the video. The object you hug doesn't even necessarily need to be a pallet loop or a window. If you're dead zoned and are gonna get hit regardless, hug around a tree or a random rock for a little while. You'll still probably get hit, but you may be able to buy a few extra seconds, which adds up in the end. Important thing to remember while doing this is keeping the killer in view the best you can. So as soon as they catch up, you can use the speed you get from getting hit to make the most possible distance. The last important thing to try and keep in mind while pathing is unique pathing. A lot of loops, such as Shack, have one single way to run it, with not much room for mind games. But for tiles like 4 lanes and jungle gyms, you have the opportunity to hug around the outer walls in a non-orthodox way to throw off the killer. People talking about having unique pathing has become somewhat of a meme in the community at this point. But still, if you hug the outside of a wall that breaks line of sight from the killer, and the killer expects you to stay close to whatever resource you're near, it has the potential to really throw them off. Just make sure you're not losing distance trying to uniquely path around a tile. This leads us to our next tip, not wasting distance. The easiest example of this is when you get hit, using all 2 seconds of speed to get as much distance as you can from the killer. If you think you're gonna get hit, it's much better to just take the distance rather than try and dodge the hit or risk getting hit through a pallet. If you have the health state to waste, just hold forward and look for your next loop. The biggest things to avoid here are getting hit before falling off somewhere high, because if you don't have balanced landing, the stagger from falling will waste all of the speed you got from getting hit, and you'll most likely go down. Another thing to avoid is running into objects when you get hit. Granted, I do this all the time. I've noticed though, once survivors learn how to look behind them and chase, for a while they only look behind them and run into objects. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you know how to look behind you and chase. It's hard to do, and even harder to do on controller, but it's doable. If you don't know how to look behind you and chase, go into a private lobby with a friend and just practice if you're not confident in your ability. Practice this until you're able to retain what's in front of you well enough to not run into anything while keeping your camera on the killer. If you only learn one thing from this video, make sure it's that. It is the biggest gap between a new and experienced survivor. Now, I know these tips don't include all scenarios. If you're looking behind you and hugging a tile perfectly, it won't matter if you're playing against a nurse. These tips don't account for specific interactions with killers that can counter pallets, windows, or just have an anti-loop ability altogether. The best thing this video will do for you is give you a much better understanding of the essential knowledge, which will help you in the long run have an easier time dealing with specific killers. Another thing to mention when talking about distance is when to throw a pallet. If you know you're gonna get hit through a pallet, try and think about 2 things. Is this a god pallet, and do I have another resource nearby? If it is a god pallet and you're getting hit regardless, it can be a good idea to throw the pallet and take as much distance as possible. If you have other loops nearby though, it can be better to take the hit and leave the pallet up, using your speed to get to another loop to save the god pallet for later. If you don't see any resources you can easily run to, dropping the pallet and taking the hit is most likely your best option. If it's not a god pallet and you don't have any resources you can easily run to, the best thing to do is try and loop the pallet, assuming it's a safe pallet and not something you can easily get hit through while looping. If you do have a resource to run to, it's in your best interest to take the distance and loop something new. Either way, if you're getting hit, it's usually not worth it to drop a filler pallet, as the killer can just go around without breaking it, and you're better off saving the pallet to avoid a hit later. All of the previous tips lead into the biggest thing, wasting the killer's time. The biggest identifier of a good survivor is someone who can waste the killer's time the longest, while ideally using minimal resources. Prevent that first hit as long as you can. If you're caught in a dead zone, try and die corner map to waste even more time. Every second wasted from a killer is more time to progress on gens and get out of the trial. Although something to keep in mind, if you're doing a good job wasting the killer's time, the killer may leave chase with you. If you want to capitalize on the time you've wasted, get on a gen or do something else productive as fast as you can to force the killer to interrupt you if they don't want to lose pressure. This is the optimal way to play, and I made this video to try and help players of all skill levels, but not every game needs to be played optimally. You're ideally playing for fun. What you decide is fun is up to you. If you find more fun in wasting the killer's time in chase, do your best to practice that. If you find more fun in escaping the trial, focus more on being on gens when you can and playing for the team. With that being said, trying to learn all things talked about in this video will help your gameplay in most aspects. Just remember to hone your skills to the area that you find most fun. The next biggest tip is learning to play around your random teammates. The hardest part about Survivor is queuing with other random survivors, because you never know what you're gonna get. Learning to play around a variety of random teammates can improve your odds of escaping. If one of your teammates seems newer and maybe not as confident in chase with the killer, try and take the aggro for them and hope they get on a gen. It's okay if you're not the best in chase either, but you'll probably have better odds than that Prestige 2 console bill. On the flip side, if someone seems really confident in chase, make sure you're on a gen. The most annoying part of having a really good chase with the killer is most times your team isn't on gens and all the time you wasted was for nothing. These are two ideal situations, where both ways something is getting done. A lot of the time though, a teammate won't be on gens or taking chase, making you wonder why they added AI teammates into the game without telling anyone. When your teammate decides a bush in the corner map is more interesting than escaping the trial, the best thing to do is split pressure the best you can with the remaining survivors. Make sure survivors are on separate gens unless you're trying to break a 3-gen, and hope to god that you can last with the killer long enough to get some value out of it being a 3v1. In some instances though, you just can't win, and that's okay. I've had games where I've looped for well above 4 minutes, more than enough time for at least 3 gens to be done, and then I get trash talked by my team in the endgame for dropping too many pallets. There's always going to be wild cards when playing with random teammates, but if you can identify who the wild cards are and how they're most likely to play, you can fill whatever role they lack. Now for arguably one of the most important tips, don't play afraid. The biggest thing I see people do that loses them the game is play the entire match scared of the killer. I know when you're less confident in chase, the idea of being seen by the killer is awful and you want to do anything you can to avoid it, but you gotta trust yourself and your teammates to support you through the match, because they're most likely trusting you too. Here are some really good examples of ways you can play a bit more confidently to help win more matches. For one, if everyone on your team has more hook states than you, try and get the killer's attention. Even if you go down fast, you've still bought a bit of time for your teammates to reset or do gens. You also save someone from either going on death hook or just dying on hook. Another good example is getting dangerous gens done first. On maps that have gens close to the middle, it can be really strong to get these gens done first, since it's harder for the killer to patrol gens on the edge map if that's all that's left. This also helps prevent 3 gens. Watching what your team is doing on the HUD can also help with this. If you know someone is getting chased, you can confidently go for a dangerous gen or get a hook save. Play confident in your ability even if you're not, and naturally over time you'll get better. The last example is making decisions. They don't always have to be the right call, but you'll be so much better off making a decision instantly rather than wasting time trying to figure out what to do. Hesitation will probably end up messing you up more than whatever you were going to do instinctively. This also applies to looping. Always take control of the situation and learn from it if it was the wrong call. In every area in this game and every area period, you gotta be bad before you can be good. Don't let it discourage you. You'll get there. Before we get to the last tip, subscribe. Right now. You've made it this far, so might as well, right? I'm really hoping to hit 3K before the end of this year, so let's make it happen. And lastly, by far the most important tip that extends past Dead by Daylight is don't tilt. Don't let the game get to the point where it actually makes you mad. This is something everyone struggles with in some way or another. Getting left to die by teammates, losing to a player who you think is worse than you, or uncontrollable game bugs that cause you to lose. Not getting mad at DBD and games in general is a really difficult thing to do, but it's the thing I recommend the most to get better all around. When you don't let the stupid things that happen get to you, it's much easier to do better next time, or avoid whatever initially got you mad. If you keep yourself calm, you'll play better naturally, being more confident in your ability and in your decision making, as well as react without your judgment being clouded. Seriously, try this in your next match. If something makes you mad, try and detach and look at what you could have done differently. This is the most important and hardest thing to do on this list. It also carries over to other games, as I've mentioned. I've noticed countless times that I play worse when I'm upset about something, and much better when I'm in a good state of mind. Go into every game expecting some BS to happen, and you'll handle it so much better, which in turn will help you improve in literally every other area of the game. If you learned anything new in this video, make sure to go drop a like, and join the Discord server to get notified for new uploads. Link in the description. YouTube thinks you'll like this specific video, so go see if they're right.